Alright, so we're sitting here in the Civic. We're still under the awning, so there's not direct sunlight on the roof yet, but there is some direct sunlight on the rear window, and it's getting pretty toasty back there. Today, since I've got the doors on, I'm going to be driving around a bit, seeing if I can't get the firewall that is uncovered, the transmission tunnel that has thermal insulation on it, and the roof to get some heat on them. I've got my handy dandy FLIR from my Android phone there. Got baseline pictures sitting in the shade but outside, so it's in ambient temperature without sun. I've got nothing on the trunk lid or the back region. I don't know if you guys can see it from here, but it is all unfinished, uncovered, just plain metal. I've got a rubber sheet so stuff doesn't slide around in the trunk, but that is it. In the front, we've got just the factory firewall stuff that Honda put in for the Civics. We've got this insulation, which is blast furnace refractory ceramic blanket, which I've sealed with aluminum duct tape. I've got a spot that's not finished yet. I want to take a little drive around and see how hot these uncovered sections get in comparison with the sections that are covered. I still need to put tape on some edges. You see the little bits that are hanging out there. But I'm gonna drive around. It's a nice hot day outside. The sun's out. There's not that many clouds in the sky, so you can see I'm pretty red and I'm pretty sweaty because it's pretty hot in here. I don't know exactly what the temperature inside here is. I don't have just a standard thermometer for air temperature. I'm just gonna go for a little drive. I've got the heater core bypassed, and I just put some distilled water in there. Never run tap water in your engines. Did a tiny bit of NVH. You can see the foam there. I haven't done the wheel wells yet, and I didn't do any NVH on the headliner because it's already kind of forcing the headliner down, the stuff I did put up there. But I am going to be doing a little bit of foam, I think, in the pillars. And then in the trunk, there's just big empty regions that with the factory interior, it was just that plastic with the fabric on one side just kind of glued on that just kind of filled the access to the voids, but the voids are there, so it's a big speaker box essentially. So we're going to be driving around with the windows up, which is not going to be pleasant. I'm actually going to grab my water when I cut before I head out, and that way I don't just die driving down the road. But yeah, we're gonna drive around, see what happens. Alright, so I just did a little bit of drive around, and I came up, there's a fairly steep hill over by my neighborhood. It's 25, so it's not a heavy load, but came up the hill, sitting at the top right now. Took the thermal camera. Things don't appear to be too hot. The windows, I did crack just a little bit, just to get a little bit of airflow. I got some airflow coming through the holes in the firewall, and I could feel it starting to get warm as I got to the top of the hill. So now I'm gonna drive out on a road that's 55 for about a mile or so, see if I can't get some heat to come up through the transmission tunnel, which is an exhaust tunnel on this car. It's hot in the garage. I'll show you guys the thermometer over here. Not cold. I do have a room AC that I stuck out here. Keep the garage door closed, try to keep it a little bit cooler in here. But the lowest I ever saw it get was 80, which 80 is better than 90, but I'd rather it be 50. Here's a Civic sitting out in the sun. It's been out here all day since I drove it around yesterday. And I'm just gonna open the door, sit inside, and see what it's like. It's gonna be a subjective experience. It is quite warm in here. It's not really that bad. So if we go over real quick to the Accord and do the same kind of test, a subjective temperature test, open the door, and yeah, and heat just blasts out at you. It is definitely hotter in this Accord. As you can see, there's no tent on the Accord. There's nothing to keep light from heating up the interior bits like there is on the Civic. So, that makes sense. I would make the claim that putting the insulation on the Civic made a substantial difference in the interior heat, and I can definitely say that while driving around yesterday in the heat, it wasn't that bad, honestly. It was, I definitely still wanted AC in the car. I've driven that car around without the insulation, just factory interior, and I've driven it around in the summer, and it was terrible before. It was just completely too hot to drive around in. There was no way. That's why I put the AC back in it. Previous owner had ripped it out for whatever reason. Conclusion time. I would say that installing the insulation on the Civic has achieved the desired outcome in that the interior is now cooler at rest than it was previously. This will end up making AC components and heater components work more efficiently. I'll lose less heat through the body or cooling through the body, or I'll absorb less heat into the cab from outside the cab through the body than I was previously. The next step on the Civic is going to be redesigning the HVAC system from the ground up, essentially. I'm putting a larger compressor in it. I have to change the exhaust to remove some more heat from the condenser because they sit right up against each other. I need to redesign the AC compressor bracket because the compressor that I want to put on there, the pulley is larger. I might change the pulley, I don't know yet. But I need to redesign the blower box that sits on the firewall. I also need to design and machine adapters for the evaporator and the expansion block because the ones that I plan to put in are different from the factory Civic parts. 134A, the lines are going to stay the same size, they're going to route the same, I'm not moving that. I'm also going to put a slightly larger receiver dryer in the system that will help make it slightly more efficient at moving heat. I've been thinking about redesigning the condenser area, the support region where the condenser goes, to fit a larger condenser and more fans to increase airflow. But I think for now, I'm going to leave the factory condenser, the factory lines, and just update the receiver dryer, the expansion valve, and evaporator core, and the heater core, which goes on the cooling system, but that moves heat into the cabin. There's not that much I can do for the heater core because the 1.5 and 1.6 Hondas from the 80s and 90s were designed to run with 170 or 175 degree thermostats, which means there is less thermal energy overall in the system that you can move from the engine into the cab. So you're not going to feel that very, very hot air coming out of the vents simply because there's not that much thermal energy in the coolant. So that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, comment down below, like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more of my projects.